Today I am going to continue with the book Ground, Path, and Fruition by Taisitu Rinpoche. And this section is a continuation of the teachings that he gave on the perfection of wisdom, the different views of emptiness, the Rang Tong, the Shen Tong, and then Madhyamaka. So this is, you might say, the culmination of this section, and it's called Pramana. And he defines this as, quote, based on the sutras in Abhidharma, it is basically a tool to understand them properly. That's on page 98, which is the beginning of this section. So he starts out talking about karma as cause and effect and explaining how karma works, that things don't just happen randomly or accidentally, that they're a result of causes and conditions. And that to understand this properly requires, you might say, examination and logic. And that is what this section talks about. So in his discussion of karma, he says that things happen due to causes and conditions. And what makes Buddhism different than other traditions of investigation is that we take into consideration past lives and the karma that we carry into our present life from these past lives, and that we have had countless past lives beyond, I think, infinity. I've never heard that particular term used in Buddhism, but basically that is what he is talking about, that there is no beginning, and therefore there is no beginning, no first life that we had, that the Buddha talked about the beginningless beginning. And so we've had beginningless numbers of lives before this and have accumulated huge amounts of karma. And another element of this form of investigation, he talked about, because there is today, there will be a tomorrow. Because there is a present moment, there will be a next moment. And in Buddhist cosmology, we are now in the present of in an aeon, and an aeon is the length of time between the birth of a universe and the death of a universe. But we are in the middle of an aeon, and before this aeon, there were previous aeons, and again, going back and back and back as far as you can imagine, and again, no beginning. So even if the sun would explode, the earth is destroyed, there will be a next moment. There might not be a tomorrow in terms of conventional thinking, because tomorrow we think about it begins with sunrise. And if there's no sun, of course, the sun can't arise, but definitely this doesn't stop time. A quote that I liked is that this on page 99, our past doesn't stop conveniently at our birth. Nothing stops conveniently anywhere. So the point being is that we need to take a longer view, and take much more into consideration than you might say people conventionally do. Quite honestly, at least in the United States, that thinking and planning far into the future is like saving up for retirement. And a lot of people are incapable of even doing that for various reasons. So what is considered a long time is, you might say, relative. It depends on the person that is making the judgment and is observing. But in terms of analysis, Buddhist analysis, that everything is a continuation from what has occurred previously. So he explains karma in more detail as using the example of planting rice. If you plant rice, you get rice and you harvest rice. You don't get corn and you don't get any other types of plants when you plant rice. You get rice. And so karma is frequently compared to seed and fruit, or in this case, seed and harvest. That what we are experiencing in our present lifetime is a result of our accumulated karma from past lifetimes, and perhaps some from this lifetime. And he goes on to say that this is why we can explain different preferences among people. And it is a result of partially the culture that they were brought up in, but also karma. Some people like hot peppers. Some twins are very similar, but some twins become very different in terms of their preferences, tastes, habits, and so forth. And since Taisito Rinpoche was talking about karma and preferences, an experience that I had with Lama Karma when he was visiting here once to give teachings, that kind of points out the how art can be appreciated differently and seen differently by different people. And so in the dining room, by the dining room table, I had uh, a copy of a Picasso painting. And Lama Karma commented on this by saying that the artist wasn't a very good painter. And of course, other people would disagree with him about Picasso. But this is cultural, and again, a result of our karmic patterns. And so the point being that not everybody appreciates Picasso, and that's fine. It's not something that is solid. You could say the same thing about food, as I mentioned with hot peppers. You could say the same thing about music. Some people hate rap music. Some people love rap music. Some people think the only music out there that's valid is classical music, and so on and so forth. So he kind of finishes up this point by saying it is through the Pramana that we get these teachings correctly. He then goes into the investigation of the concept of God. And in here, now these teachings were given in India, I'm fairly certain, And he talks about Hindu gods, and we're not, at least I am not that familiar with Hindu gods. And some of this, let's say I could have understood better if I had a better background in Hindu mythology and religion. So, in terms of God, Buddhists do not believe that somebody created them. Quote on page 99, we consider ourselves equal to the highest power and believe we created ourselves. And going back to karma, what this means is that because of our actions of body, speech, and mind in the past, what we are experiencing now is due to karma, to cause and effect. And besides that, what we are projecting on our experience is due to cause and effect. And this would include different tastes in food, art, music, the kind of people we want to hang around with, and so on and so forth. So we create ourselves and our world based on our mental conditioning, our habitual patterns, and karmic cause and effect. And all of them are different forms of karma. And then, of course, it's all interdependent. And this goes back to what he said earlier about there's no convenient place for things to end or begin. So Buddha nature is our ultimate essence, and it is this that is the source of creation, according to the teachings of the Buddha. And I'm not going to get too deeply into these Hindu gods that he discusses. So I'm going to go down to close to the end of this section and discuss what he was talking about with God. One God being a creator, another God being the maintainer, and a third God being the destroyer. And so the point that he is making here is that who we are is created when we do not recognize our ultimate essence. And he's talking about our ego, our sense of self. And then this is maintained by believing this illusion and then spinning around in samsara, one lifetime after another, after another. And the destroyer aspect of the Hindu god is in Buddhism when we wake up and defeat ego and the poisons of the mind. And it is our primordial wisdom, our yeshe, that accomplishes this. So that is why he says in Buddhism, we are the creator, we are the maintainer, and we are the destroyer. And of course, when ego is defeated and eliminated, then you are beyond coming and going, beyond today, tomorrow, yesterday, that you're beyond time. And there's nothing to maintain, no illusion to maintain. So the important point that he is making here is that an external God is dualistic and Buddha is non-dualistic. and that you are the Buddha. And that the Buddha is limitless and is supreme. There is nothing above a Buddha. And so it then goes into the qualities of the Buddha a little bit. And he says that a Buddha does not have likes and dislikes, does not have preferences, does not get angry at beings, is not impressed by beings when they make offerings to him. That a Buddha regards all sentient beings with love and kindness and compassion and is equal. It is not that he sees everybody as being identical, but he sees everybody as being equal. And this is the point that is very, very important to remember, that while the compassion and loving kindness is there equally for all, whether you receive it or not is up to you. That this is what we work on doing, and that is being what he referred to as a proper vessel. So that if we are a proper vessel, we can not only receive his blessings and benefit from them, but we can receive them more fully. And so there are different vessels that are used to describe this. And I'm going to use this singing bowl, if you can see that, as an example. And so the one improper approach would be what's called an overturned cup. And the idea here is that you cannot pour anything into an overturned cup. And this would be a person that is has an aversion for the Dharma, is not interested in the Dharma. Another vessel would be one that is facing upright, but it's already full. And in this case, nothing can be poured into it because it's already full. And so you want to avoid that approach. This is when you're arrogant and you feel that you know it all already. A third is where there is some poison in the bottom of the cup, or perhaps stuck to the cup. And so even if you put in the pure Dharma, it is poisoned, and there's no benefit, and in fact it can be harmful. So we want to avoid, you might say, adding poisonous opinions and judgments and values to Buddhism, so that what we are receiving is the pure Dharma. And so the ideal vessel is a cup that is empty, that's facing upwards, and then you can receive the blessings of the Buddha, you can receive the teachings that your guru or gurus give you, and utilize them. I remember reading a book by Chogyam Trungpa many years ago, and he said that a good student seduces the teacher with his or her cupness. You might say draws the teachings out of the teacher, makes the teacher want to give you these teachings because the teacher knows that you are a suitable vessel. So that is a short teaching on being a proper vessel. Let me see now. So what is important here is that we do the best we can to be a proper vessel. And then another point that's important here is receptivity, that we are receptive. Because as he mentioned, that the love and the compassion of a Buddha is always there, and he does not, or she does not hold it back from us. And so it's a matter of us being receptive. And I like to use the example of, I think this is a modern example, Wi-Fi. So you might say a person that has never run into Wi-Fi, never heard of it before, is totally unaware of it, might think that there's nothing, you might say, going on in a place where Wi-Fi is present. But if you turn your digital device on and make it receptive to that particular Wi-Fi channel, suddenly you have access to the whole internet. And it's a bit like that we have to make ourselves receptive to the blessings of the Buddha before we can benefit. So, as always in Buddhism, the responsibility is on the student, the practitioner, to do what is necessary to receive the blessings, to receive the teachings, and then you might say put them into action and travel the path. We need to abide in morality. We need to show devotion and respect to the teacher and to the Buddha, not because they ask it or require it, but it is for our benefit. So what we receive is entirely up to us. In a way, it's empowering because it leaves us with the power to receive the blessings. It's not that we have to figure out how to get someone else to give it to us. And so he also then talks about the Indian custom of warding off jealousy by hanging a chili and a lemon. And he seems to think this is kind of a silly custom, but at the end of his discussion of this, he says, well, I was out driving, and I bought 5 of them when someone stopped me to sell them. But he says that since a person with nothing can still be jealous of somebody else that has nothing, that this shows how, quote, the way we perceive things is an illusion, end quote. So now he goes into a little bit more of the Madhyamaka, that it needs to be understood with the Pramana, with logic and common sense and examination and investigation. And what came to my mind was at the beginning of the book, we went over his poem And at one point, he talked about how these different traditions and schools and so forth have multiplied and multiplied over the millennia, and it can make your head spin like a peacock feather umbrella. And I had the feeling that after last Tuesday discussing Madhyamaka, that that's where many of you were. And it would be understandable. So this section, he kind of clarifies this. Last week, we went through very detailed names and lists and so forth, different schools. So Madhyamaka is the middle way, as he already talked about. Quote, everything is neither this nor that, and the essence of everything is limitless and beyond dualistic fixation or limitation. Excuse me, limitation, not fixation. So this is how he sums up Madhyamaka, or the middle way. It's not this, it's not that, it's limitless, and it's beyond any type of dualistic limitation. And the Shentong view of Madhyamaka is that mind is everything, the essence of everything, and the essence is limitless. So this is kind of a review, but I think you'll find that this may help a little bit to understand last week's talk and that section of the book that just preceded this section. And hopefully your head has stopped spinning by now. So he uses a number of examples here that are common in Tibetan Buddhism. First is mind is empty and limitless like the sky. But you have to add to that that in that limitless and empty sky is a sun, which expresses the luminous quality of mind, as opposed to a reflective quality of mind. The moon, for instance, reflects the sun. And so the moon is not luminous. But mind, it does not reflect somebody else's mind or something else. It itself is luminous. And then he also includes Vajra as being solid. And the Vajra symbolizes indestructibility. So it has both of those connotations. Solid is the word that he used, and then indestructible. And finally, he puts in there that it is illusory like a rainbow. So that ends this entire, not only section, but this entire chapter of the book. So next are the questions and answers. And the first question was, is Buddha nature permanent? And the answer was quite simple, and that is, you could say that, but it would be better to say that it is beyond being permanent and impermanent. And again, this is an example of the middle way of Madhyamaka. The next one he liked a lot because it really brought up some very important material. And the question was about logical proof and reasoning in Buddhism. And the questioner asks, is it just based on actual experience and inference? That this is basically it for proof and reasoning in Buddhism. And Taisita Rinpoche goes into this in much greater detail. He says it's more than that. He says that there also is belief without using wisdom. And so this belief would include faith and trust. And these can come from experience. That is, that as you practice and study more and more, that you start developing a confidence and a trust and a faith in the teachings and the teachers. But that this faith is not based on dogma. And there's a story in Tibetan Buddhism, and it talks a little bit about this kind of faith. And the story goes, and of course, this happened in Tibet centuries ago, that there was a merchant, and he would go to at least Nepal, if not India, buying up things to bring back to Tibet and then sell. And so his wife kept asking him to come back with a tooth of the Buddha so that she could put it on her shrine and do devotional prayers to it. And he came back from India maybe 2-3 times, and he always forgot to bring back a tooth of the Buddha. And finally, she tells him, as he's leaving once more to go to India, that if you come back one more time without a tooth of the Buddha, I'm going to kill myself. And so his behavior is the same on this trip. And as he is back in Tibet now and traveling towards home, he realizes, oh, I forgot to get that tooth of the Buddha. And so as he is traveling, he's on foot, of course, maybe with a horse or two to carry the load, but he's walking very slowly, but he spies a skeleton of a dog on the side of the road, the path. Road, I think, is a little bit too not descriptive. This would have been a path. And so he takes a tooth from the dog, puts in his pocket, and when he gets home and his wife asks, he gives her the dog's tooth. And so she believes him and has total faith in this tooth being from the Buddha, and she puts it on her shrine and does daily devotions to it very fervently with total faith. And amazingly enough, it begins to have a little, you might say, pearl-like objects that manifest next to it. And this happens with true relics. And when this started to happen, she, of course, was very, very delighted. And she told the local lama, and the local lama came to see it. And he looked at the tooth, and he immediately recognized it as being a dog's tooth. And he told her, this is not the tooth of the Buddha. This is a dog's tooth. But the point of the story is that it's possible to receive blessings from the tooth of a dog if you have faith and confidence and trust. The Karmapa has said, just to kind of add a little bit more nuance to this story, the Karmapa has said that blind faith is an impediment to wisdom. So the Karmapa encourages us, his students, to also study and practice and so forth. That don't look at the Karmapa or the Buddha as being a savior, that like a person from a theistic religion might look at their God. Because again, it's on our shoulders. So he kind of sums up this section by saying Prajnaparamita, Madhyamaka, Pramana, Abhidharma, etc., all help with reasoning and help us understand that reality is what we perceive. He then goes into that a human being from a different universe might look completely different from a human being on Earth. We might not even be able to perceive them. They might not even have eyes. What they would have in common with us would be the psychology. And so he goes into this concept of, and I'm not even going to use the Tibetan word, that here on Earth, we humans all share similar fortune. That we actually, all of us humans, share a huge amount of similarity and commonality with small differences. And it's all due to karma. We took birth in the human realm this time around because of our good karma. And then after that, he talks about how starts getting technical. And this shows you how technical Buddhist logic and examination gets. He talks about non-associated compositional factors. And he said that these are not arrived at through reason or through experience. Quote, they are there, but you can't put your finger on them. And it seemed to me he was talking about his pad of paper that he had bought a number of years ago and written these notes down that he is using to teach from. And he finishes up the answer to that question by, once you believe, you don't need reasoning. Then the next question was asking him to elaborate on the mind-only school. And he said that the mind-only school and the Madhyamaka are both in the Mahayana tradition, and that the mind only says that everything is a manifestation of mind in simple terms. You could go on for days and weeks, months, years studying and reading about and learning more and more about the mind-only school. But he's keeping this very simple. And so being mind-only, everything in a relative reality and ultimate reality is mind only. And he says that Madhyamaka doesn't say this exactly. And I'm just going to leave that at that point. So the next was about valid perception. And he says that, again, I'm not using the Tibetan terms here, the Sanskrit terms. The Tibetan that was used is the opposite is non-valid cognition. And he described that as mistaking, someone mistaking you for somebody else. That's non-valid cognition. Valid cognition would be someone coming up to you and being able to call you by your full name and maybe tell more information about you, like perhaps your age. I believe he used the term other identifying factors. So direct valid cognition is what we experience through our five senses. And then there is inferential valid cognition, and that is presuming something based on valid cognition of other things. And he used the example of this drilling in the room above him, that you heard the sound and you knew somebody was up there doing some work, and so that they were drilling upstairs. And the question then ends with him talking at great length about how the Galupas study this text called the Compendium of Valid Cognition. And the Galupas, this is the Dalai Lama's lineage, they really stress scholasticism. The Kagyus are sometimes called the practice lineage. They tend to lean in the other direction. So the way the Galupas study is that, first of all, they would study the first two lines in this text, and it's a big text. And the translation in English of the first two lines are what became of valid cognition, ? And he has in brackets for valid cognition, the truth. So what became of the truth? Wishing to benefit other sentient beings, I bow my heart to the teacher who has reached peace, the protector. And the teacher who has reached peace is, of course, the Buddha. And so each of these words would be dissected, you might say. What is the definition of the word? What is trying to be conveyed here? And on and on and on and on and on. And he said that this would include discussing that the Buddha had many billions and billions and billions of lives before his one as the Buddha, as Prince Siddhartha. And it was in one of those a very, very, very long time ago that he was poor and made an offering of food to the Buddha and made this pledge to be able to liberate all beings and become like the Buddha that he had met. And that his life as Prince Siddhartha was a fruition of that aspiration. And so he kind of sums this up by saying that debate can get competitive. I did once view a debate session over in Tibet. And I will say this, that it was definitely competitive in terms of the way a sports game might be competitive in this country. And the person doing the debating is basically trying to make the person that the questions are being asked of to take a stand that is indefensible. And so they ask very, very detailed questions. And these questions, you could say, sometimes are a little bit tricky. And that is that they are intended to trip up the person that is going to answer the question. But the point is that by debating, you really get to know the material, and that the Glopas would spend 6 months on these first two simple sentences, debating them and coming from every which direction possible, testing the understanding of the monk that they are debating, and so on down the line. And Taisiji Rinpoche says, quote, by debating, by really scrutinizing and drilling through these topics, you receive the true lessons. And he finishes up by saying this: if you have faith, devotion, and trust, you don't have to spend all of your time doing debate and learning logic. You can just practice and meditate.